Wherever you are in the world, welcome to another of my takes on China. It's not a good start to any media article when the subheadline contains an editorial error, but this headline, which reads, quote, Chinese minister invited to AI summit helped create cyborg rats, end of quote. That indicates that the once world-renowned Daily Telegraph has entered an era of sensationalism and amateurism. Genocide and cyborg rats in one headline probably weren't on anyone's bingo card for the week, but clearly the two things are designed to instill fear in the readers, and if we really want to know more about it, we should be able to read the article for clarification. But we can't, because there isn't any, at least none that's honest. Unbelievably, the topic of the article is an AI conference which is designed to help prevent the increase of AI-generated child sexual images on the internet, pedophilia. But because a man from China has been invited, his connections to a scary scientific experiment, a tenuous link to unproven allegations, and if we're to be honest here, a completely debunked genocide, are all brought into play. While the subheadline says the word genocide, the article softens that to Uyghur abuses in Xinjiang, presumably because their lawyers would have told them to do so. They know there has been no genocide. Quite the opposite, in fact. The number of Uyghurs in Xinjiang today is far greater than any time before, and they're living longer and richer lives. But that's a different story which has been well addressed by me and many others before. The headline mistakenly entitles Vice Minister Wu Jiahui as a minister. It thereafter calls him Mr., saying he's been described or decribed as the man whose fingerprints are all over the Uyghur genocide. Well, the person who described him this way becomes clear towards the end of the article. It's British Hong Kong activist Luke de Pulford, the founder of an organisation which the Telegraph very politely but also erroneously calls the Inter-Parliamentary Alliance, leaving out the most important words. Its correct name is the Inter-Parliamentary Alliance on China, IPAC. Now, this is a group of mostly right-wing but 100% anti-China legislators funded by more anti-China bodies such as the USA State Department, National Endowment for Democracy, the NED, often referred to as a CIA cutout, George Soros's Open Society, which has long been critical of China, and in particular of Xi Jinping, and the Taiwan Foundation for Democracy, which was founded with, believe it or not, the assistance of the NED. As is often said, when you want to know what's really going on, follow the money. De Pulford is the only person who describes Vice Minister Wu as implicit in the Uyghur genocide, and his basis for the claim is completely mind-boggling. As head of a university in Zhejiang province in 2016, at least 1 year before this concoction of Xinjiang persecution stories, Vice Minister Wu, as a professor, agreed to a comprehensive strategic framework involving talent exchanges with the Xinjiang Production and Construction Corps, the XPCC. Now, if that sounds terrible and genocidal, let's take a closer look at what it actually meant. The aim of the framework was, and this is a direct quote from the Telegraph's own article, to give, quote, full play to the advantages of Zhejiang University in education, medical care, talent, scientific research, etc., to promote the transformation and upgrading of industrial structure of the Xinjiang Production and Construction Corps, and to enhance the ability and level of the public service on social causes. It was to promote the development of Zhejiang University as well. Vice Minister Wu apparently sought to exchange talents to improve and enhance individuals and societal structures with Xinjiang. This should seem to most observers to be the absolute opposite of a form of oppression. Yet from this, de Pulford claims Minister Wu's fingerprints are all over the Uyghur genocide. The gist of the allegations of genocide stem back to the fact that the ex-PCC, who Vice Minister Wu worked with, are sanctioned by the US State Department for their part in this imaginary genocide. But clearly, neither the US State Department, IPAC, nor De Pulford have read Oxford University's 2018 report on the ex-PCC, where there's much talk of positive work being made, but no mention whatsoever of any participation in Uyghur affairs. In fact, quite the opposite. The ex-PCC works independently and remotely from the local populations and solely for the benefit of the region. Academic proof, if needed, that claims of their involvement of any kind of persecution are pure fantasy. What could and should have been an interesting article about how our social media giants are proposing to control a serious issue, pedophilia, has been sidelined because of what they'd like us to think of as an Oriental Frankenstein, who might have had a hand in murdering millions of people, is coming to town. But getting back to the story of cyborg rats, and here again the Telegraph has got the story wrong. It wasn't hard for me to find a link to the work that Professor Wu had been doing. The online Discover magazine has an interesting write-up, I've linked it, on this work. Brain-brain interfaces are nothing new in science. Neither are brain-machine interfaces. And if we think about how an amputee controls movement in their prosthetic arm or leg, we get a better understanding of the concept of this. Professor Wu, the Telegraph tells us, conceived and designed the experiments in Zhejiang University, didn't do them himself. But some rats with a similar technology connected through Bluetooth to humans had their directions controlled. The experiment was a great success, with some rats performing flawlessly, and the applications for this kind of experiment aren't hard to understand. China was devastated by an earthquake in 2008. 69,000 people at least lost their lives. Search and rescue times could have been dramatically reduced by the ability to send rats into very small gaps, so efforts to rescue could be focused where it's known lives could be saved. The Telegraph didn't mention any of this, nor did it link its sources, but it suggested that the rats were hooked up to computers. They weren't. They were connected to humans. And perhaps that was an earlier or later or a different experiment that the Telegraph saw. I don't know. Putting aside the references to an imaginary genocide, the incorrect information about the experiments Minister Wu had not even conducted, and the rest of the article about a very serious matter of child pornography was in fact an interesting read. The highlights of it were that Prime Minister Rishi Sunak admitted a summit on AI wouldn't be a summit without China. Meta, Facebook, didn't even bother to turn up, and TikTok, the source of much concern about China's influence on young people, signed a pledge to root out child sex abuse images. And what a pity that such important pieces of information played second fiddle to a made-up story. Thanks very much for watching Jerry's Take on China, and I hope you'll do all the usual things, like, share, subscribe, and hopefully we'll get these messages out to a lot of people. See you next time.